Eduardo Engel is president of Espacio Público, a leading Chilean think tank. In 2015, he presided over President Michelle Bachelet's Advisory Council on Conflict of Interest, Influence-Peddling, and Corruption. He joins us today to discuss the latest on Chile's reform agenda. Eduardo, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let me ask you, before we talk about the present, to take you back in time to when you first began chairing this commission. How did you orient yourself to the job? How did you get in the right mindset to take on this amazing challenge?
Well, we had only 45 days, so I had really to get into the mindset pretty fast. The first thing I did was talk on the phone or personally to people who had chaired other commissions in Chile and abroad, and just to learn fast what they would have liked to know when they started it and only knew by the end of their commission. And I took their advice close to heart. One of the main things was that we should focus on unanimous proposals, that when you sort of replicate differences you already have in society, it's of no use. If you come up with unanimous proposals, that will really change the ballgame. And that we did. We came up with 217 very specific, concrete, unanimous proposals. 92% of our proposals were unanimous in this commission, even though we were very, very different and diverse. We had people which were close to Pinochet and people who were close to the Communist Party and everything in between. But when it came to concrete proposals on how to make a better democracy, better institutions, to deal with corruption, we were able to come to very broad agreements.
Why were you able to achieve a 92% unanimous rate with a diverse group of people?
The methodology we used is we discussed every topic. We would come up with the first draft, but that draft was not voted on. I waited for the last weekend. We went outside of Santiago to a place by the beach, a Jesuit vacation place, away from the press, no pressures. The idea was that people would be thinking about the distant future and their grandchildren and not about the daily politics when they made the decision. And in that atmosphere, we created a moment where I asked people, you know what, unless there's something which really goes against your principles, why don't we approve this unanimously?
So be beyond the passions of the moment.
Exactly. And it really worked well, and I think it was crucial.
Were there any particular areas that were most difficult to reach agreement?
Well, there were some areas where we knew we would not have an agreement, and I then said, look, these are areas where we've been discussing publicly, we've been on different sides of this fence for 20 years, we're not going to change our minds, so why don't we just have both point of views, and if you want a minority view, you can have it. So I think that I did not lose time on those, and one of them was whether, for example, private companies can finance politics or not. People on the right believe they should be able to finance, people on the center and left believe they should not. Both have good arguments for them, and that was an issue. Yes, we have the differences there. But for many other issues, we were able to come to agreements. And then there was often topics where someone was obsessed with one particular thing, and some of them I asked at the very last moment. I made a phone call and said, look, in this topic, you're the only vote which is not this. Could you consider? And they said, give me 2 hours to think about it, and then phone. I said, yes.
Wow, that's a great atmosphere for collaboration. So you made phone calls to people who had done this before you to ask for advice. Now you're one of those people. If you get a phone call, what is the new thing you learned that wasn't part of the lessons that were passed on to you?
Well, many things. I think one of the important things here is, to the extent that it's possible, to not have business leaders or political leaders within the commission. You should invite them all, you should listen to all of them, and they have many good ideas and proposals, but they should not be part of the commission itself. I think that was one element which allowed us to make proposals which are not popular with current leaders at the beginning at least, but which will make in much better institutions, both in terms of government institutions and the private sector.
And so now let's fast forward to where we are today, and the recommendations you've made are being acted on. What's the progress look like?
It's quite impressive if you take into account it's been only a year since this whole process began in terms of the legislative agenda. 9 laws have been passed, quite ambitious in many topics, all the way from campaign finance, party finance, internal working of political parties, civil service in Chile, declaration of interest and assets by politicians and authorities in general, civic and ethics education in schools. So you have a broad set of laws which have been passed, and then 5 or 6 more are among the laws which are priority for this legislative year.
What's the best evidence that it's working so far? I know these are relatively new laws and it takes time to change a culture, to change attitudes.
One of them is that at the beginning, politicians complained a lot about it. So if this is not going to work, they're not going to complain. But eventually, we had many leaders who supported this. But at the beginning, they really did not like it. And I think that's part of because they realized that this would change how things work. I mean, so that's one element. The second element is I think that there's an increasing awareness among citizens that this is changing things. It's a slow process, but there's some numbers coming out recently in some surveys showing already that some things are changing concretely. And I think the upcoming election this year at the municipal level, next year at the congressional and presidential level, will show people that things have changed, that now you know who's financing politicians before you did not know, that now you can bring a case to the judicial system before you could not do it. People are going to see these changes and are beginning to see them, and I'm hopeful that this will change dramatically how they perceive their elite.
So we know there was public support for reforms, obviously. What about public trust, rebuilding trust?
Well, I think you rebuild trust by first passing laws and administrative measures, but then by seeing how these laws act in practice. And that's a process which is starting now and which you will see more and more of it in the next 1 or 2 years when actually people see that things are different. Be it in the way civil service works, be it in the way elections work, being in the way political parties work, all of this, people are going to see the changes. And there's a role of civil society, which is to make it easier for people to see this and point out that this is happening, and not only the institution I preside, Espacio Público, but also other NGOs are working strongly on building this bridge with civil society, and a combination of putting pressure so that it works well and showing to the citizens that this is a new ballgame and that they can now participate in making sure that corruption is not anymore a problem.
Of the laws that have already been passed and those that are pending, are there particular ones that you see as most critical?
Among those pending, there's 2 laws I would hope to be able to have on the agenda within the next couple of years. One is corruption at the municipal level, where you need a combination of closing spaces where corruption is possible and strengthening professionally. At the municipal level, often the problem is that you have weak professionals, that they're not paid enough or that you don't have a career for them, and you must combine both elements. And the second element is defense spending. Chile spends a lot of money on defense, and there's not enough check and balances, and it's not well spent. And there's a very strange law from the dictatorship which says that 10% of sales of the state-owned copper company go directly to the armed forces, and there's little accountability. All of those things are on the agenda, and I think there's a good chance that within the next 6 months we also see a new legislative initiative emerge, and I'm hopeful about that.
Do you think you've created a model for other countries in the region?
I don't like to think of this as a model in terms of you need to adapt it to the realities of every country, and in that process you will do things differently. But I think there's some ideas here which with the right adaptation can be useful in other countries in the region, and at Espacio Público we're working strongly on precisely being able to do the following. Once you have a window of opportunity because of a corruption scandal where you can move on this agenda, how you do it best. And I think that's what we're working on. And I think in that sense, there's a research agenda there, a policy agenda there. And I'm hopeful that this will be relevant not only for Chile, which it is being already, but also for other countries in the region.
Final thought, Eduardo, is about maintaining momentum. Now that you had this exciting start and things seem to be moving and trending in positive directions, what will it take to achieve the next steps that are part of the longer term gains? And how will you maintain that momentum?
I ask myself that question
I'm
every
sure
morning.
Keep you up at night.
In an ironic sense, the number of scandals emerging continues month by the month, and of course that keeps things going. So back, for example, to how we finance the defense in Chile, it was found recently that there's evidence suggesting that the head of the armed forces some years ago might have been involved in shady dealings. Well, that is enough then to go and look at what's happening with the armed forces. So if you have an agenda, and if scandals keep emerging, that combination with the right leadership can lead to putting these topics on the agenda at the right moment. And there's a role of political leaders, and in Chile we have good leaders, and at the same time civil society supporting those leaders when they put these topics on the agenda.
Well, Eduardo Engel, thank you very much for joining us and talking about your inspiring and hopeful work. This is great stuff. I wish you continued success.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.